Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. It was a quiet evening on January 6, 1999, in a small Florida home. Sonia Nicole Spates, a 29-year-old woman, sat at the dining table working on a puzzle. Everything seemed normal, but nearby, two young siblings, just 13 and 12 years old, were planning something that would change their lives forever. With their father's pistol in hand, they slowly approached Nicole. What happened next was shocking and tragic, leaving everyone to wonder, what could push two kids to take such extreme action? Behind their decision was a story of hidden pain, fear, and desperation. But why Nicole? What led them to believe this was their only choice? The truth would reveal a heartbreaking story that had been kept secret for years. Curtis and Stacy first met in Palo Alto, California, when Stacy was just 17 years old and Curtis was 23. At the time, Stacy worked at a fast food restaurant where Curtis happened to be a customer. From their initial meeting, the two felt an undeniable connection and quickly began dating. However, their relationship faced challenges from the start. Stacy's family strongly disapproved, largely due to the racial differences between the couple. Curtis was a young black man, while Stacy was a strikingly beautiful white woman. Despite her family's objections, the two embarked on a romantic relationship. Sadly, their bond took a dark turn when Curtis began to physically abuse Stacy. What started as isolated incidents escalated over time into increasingly severe violence. The situation reached its breaking point when Stacy became pregnant with their first child, Catherine. During one particularly violent episode, Curtis injured Stacy so severely that it caused a uterine rupture, leading to Catherine's premature birth. The baby weighed less than 2 kilograms at birth and required specialized medical care. Despite this, Stacy stayed with Curtis, and the couple went on to have a second child, Curtis Jr. Following the birth of their son, the family relocated to Brevard County, Florida, in hopes of starting fresh. To outsiders, their life appeared picture perfect, but behind closed doors, Stacy continued to endure Curtis's abuse in silence, carefully hiding her suffering from her young children. Over time, however, Catherine and Curtis Jr. began to sense their mother's pain. Despite several attempts to leave, Stacy always returned to Curtis, and in 1989, the couple married. Unfortunately, the situation only worsened after their wedding, and a few months later, Stacy decided she could no longer stay. In a desperate bid for freedom, Stacy pawned a gold necklace to buy a bus ticket to Kansas, where her mother lived. Tragically, she left without her children, fearing her mother's reaction to their mixed-race background. Believing she was acting in her children's best interests, Stacy left them in Curtis's care. A few months after Stacy left, Curtis was arrested for second-degree attempted murder after shooting 2 men at a pool hall. The charges were later reduced to a misdemeanor on the grounds of self-defense. While Curtis dealt with his legal troubles, the children temporarily stayed with their mother before returning to their father. 5 years later, Stacy began to suspect something was wrong with her children. During this time, Curtis allowed a relative to move in with them. Although initially unalarming, it was later revealed that this man had a troubling past, including a 6-year prison sentence for armed robbery and registration as a sex offender for abusing a 14-year-old girl. Stacy's worst fears were confirmed during a visit with her children in Kansas. Her youngest child confided that he had been abused by the relative, who shared his bed and inappropriately touched him. Shocked and horrified, Stacy decided to take action. In a desperate move, Stacy traveled to Florida and took her children from school without permission, resulting in her arrest for interfering with custody. Although the charges against her were dropped, the children were returned to Curtis. Following the initial allegations, Florida's Department of Children and Families launched an investigation. However, when the young boy recanted his statements, claiming he had lied in hopes of removing the relative from the home, the investigation was closed. It remains unclear whether he was coerced into changing his story, but records suggest he made the statement in hopes of living with his mother full-time. Over the years, the abuse only escalated. In 1996, another investigation was opened after Curtis Jr. sustained an injury to his eye. The circumstances surrounding the injury were unclear, and the case went nowhere. By 1998, Catherine, now 12 years old, disclosed her own abuse to her father, but he dismissed her claims and sided with the relative. Frustrated by her father's indifference, Catherine decided to take matters into her own hands. One day, she confided in her teacher, sharing the horrifying details of the abuse she had been enduring. The teacher immediately filed a report with child welfare authorities. Catherine revealed that, while the relative hadn't gone as far as penetration, he had subjected her to inappropriate touching, caressing, and oral acts that left her deeply traumatized. On one occasion, the abuse was so distressing it caused her to vomit. Despite the gravity of these allegations, the investigation was slow and inconclusive. Catherine's father pressured her to retract her statements, claiming she had fabricated the story. With her retraction on record, the case was closed, and no further action was taken, apart from a warning about the relative's criminal past. This failure to act left Catherine and her brother trapped in a cycle of unrelenting abuse. At this time, Curtis' father was engaged to Nicole Spates, a 29-year-old woman from Alabama. Born on April 23, 1969, Nicole had 2 daughters from a previous relationship, Jessica, aged 9, and Eins, aged 8. While the blended family seemed harmonious on the surface, Nicole was indifferent to the struggles Catherine and Curtis Jr. faced. One morning, Catherine mustered the courage to tell her brother about the abuse she was enduring. To her surprise, Curtis Jr. not only believed her but revealed that he too was a victim of the same relative. Sharing their stories brought the siblings closer, creating a bond of solidarity amidst the chaos around them. The breaking point came in early 1999 when the relative entered the bathroom while Catherine was showering. He pulled back the curtain, exposing himself and performing a lewd act in front of her. Catherine, frozen in terror, broke down in tears as the man left a mere 50 cents on the toilet seat before leaving. This dehumanizing act pushed Catherine to the edge. Overwhelmed by rage and despair, Catherine began recording her thoughts in a journal. In it, she expressed fantasies of ending the lives of those who had allowed her and her brother to suffer, the abuser, her father, and even Nicole. Feeling trapped and unsupported, the siblings devised a drastic plan to escape their torment once and for all. On January 6, 1999, with their father away and the relative scheduled to return later, the siblings saw an opportunity. Nicole was home alone, working on a puzzle at the dining table. Armed with their father's pistol, Curtis Jr. hesitated before pulling the trigger and shooting Nicole in the chest. Overcome with emotion, he dropped the weapon, trembling and crying. Catherine, seizing control, picked up the gun and fired several more shots. In total, 9 rounds were fired, 4 of which struck Nicole fatally. Panicked and unsure of what to do next, the siblings dragged Nicole's body to the bathroom and placed it in the tub. They tried to clean the scene and stage the home to look like a robbery before fleeing. Desperate for help, they stopped at a friend's house nearby and fabricated a story, claiming the shooting was an accident. The friend's parents urged them to contact the police, but instead, the siblings ran to hide in a nearby wooded area. Meanwhile, their father returned home to find the horrifying scene and called the authorities. With tips from neighbors, law enforcement launched a search for the siblings. They were found the next morning, huddled together in the woods near Cocoa Beach. Despite their fear, Catherine, just 13 years old, tried to shield her 12-year-old brother from the consequences. She offered to take full responsibility for the crime, but Curtis Jr. confessed to his role, unwilling to let his sister bear the burden alone. Initially thought to be an accident, the shooting began to raise suspicions when the police noticed inconsistencies at the scene. Signs of an attempted cleanup suggested that something more sinister had occurred. Under interrogation, the siblings eventually admitted that the shooting had been intentional, but they withheld their true motives. They also kept silent about their broader plan to target their father and the abusive relative. At the outset of the investigation, prosecutors advanced a theory that jealousy had driven the siblings to kill Nicole. They speculated that the siblings resented their father's plans to marry her, fearing it would disrupt their family dynamic. This narrative quickly gained traction in the media and public opinion, painting the siblings as selfish, cold-hearted individuals willing to kill for attention and control. During the arraignment, the defense team tried to highlight the siblings' traumatic upbringing and the years of abuse they had endured. However, the prosecution successfully cast them as jealous monsters, framing the murder as an egotistical act. Despite their young ages, Catherine was 13 and Curtis Jr. only 12, the grand jury decided they would be tried as adults for first-degree murder. This decision was unprecedented. While most U.S. states handled minors under 18 in juvenile court, some allowed exceptions for severe crimes, as in the Jones case. The charges meant the siblings faced life imprisonment without parole if convicted. The weight of their actions began to sink in. Their father, devastated, broke down upon learning that his children would not be returning home and were instead charged with premeditated murder. In a bid to avoid a harsh sentence, prosecutors offered Catherine a deal: testify against her brother, and she might be allowed to go home. She refused, claiming she was the reason they were in this position and insisting that any punishment should be shared equally. Initially, the prosecution offered Curtis Jr. a 22-year sentence and Catherine an 18-year sentence, but she demanded that their sentences match. Ultimately, the defense negotiated a plea deal to avoid a trial. The siblings pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for an 18-year prison sentence followed by lifetime probation. The plea bargain meant there would be no formal trial to present evidence or testimony, leaving the true motivations behind their actions unheard. During sentencing in August 1999, both siblings admitted their guilt. Catherine broke down in tears, telling the judge there was no justification for taking a life. The plea deal spared them from life imprisonment, but it also meant that the systemic failures that had led to their desperate act would remain unexamined. The Department of Children and Families never had to answer for how they had failed the siblings so profoundly that they felt murder was their only escape. After sentencing, the siblings saw each other one last time during a contact visit. They were then sent to separate adult prisons, intensifying their sense of isolation and loss. In the early years of incarceration, Both struggled to adapt. Catherine found it hard to trust others, a byproduct of growing up in an environment filled with betrayal and abuse. The lack of a high school education and the absence of a normal life further hindered their personal growth. Their case attracted the attention of Paolo Anino, a law professor at Florida State University. He dedicated years to advocating for clemency on their behalf, pushing for legislative changes like the Second Chance for Juvenile Offenders Act. The proposed law aimed to grant parole opportunities to select inmates who had been sentenced as children, including the Jones siblings. The criteria required that candidates like Catherine and Curtis Jr. had been under 15 years old at the time of their crime, had no prior criminal history, and had served at least 8 years of their sentence. Despite Anino's efforts, the clemency petitions were denied, and the legislative bill failed to pass. Another proposal that would have allowed the siblings to serve only 10 years instead of 85% of their 18-year sentence also fell through. In 2004, a hurricane provided Curtis Jr. with a brief taste of freedom. Hurricane Francis struck the juvenile detention center where he was held, creating chaos. Along with other inmates, Curtis attempted to escape during the storm but was recaptured within 24 hours. As a consequence of his escape attempt, Curtis Jr.'s sentence was extended by an additional 318 days. The true story behind the crime committed by the Jones siblings came to light a decade later when Catherine agreed to give an exclusive interview to a Florida news outlet. Speaking from the Homestead Correctional Institution, where she was serving her sentence, the 23-year-old detailed her harrowing experiences, including her mother fleeing for her life after years of domestic abuse, leaving Catherine and Curtis Jr. behind to face a family that rejected them because they were biracial. Catherine recounted the years of torment she and her brother endured at the hands of an abusive relative, the inaction of their father and his fiancée, and the failure of Child Protective Services to intervene. Reflecting on the murder, she admitted to regretting taking a life but explained that, at the time, she felt she had no other option to escape the nightmare they were living. Prison, she revealed, seemed like the safest place she could imagine, somewhere far from the house where she and her brother had suffered so much. Following the publication of the article, Catherine received an unexpected letter that would change her life. The writer was Ramos Fleming, a U.S. Navy officer who had been moved by her story. At the time, Ramos was stationed thousands of miles away, navigating the Persian Gulf. A true crime enthusiast, he often spent his downtime reading about cases from his home state of Florida. When he stumbled upon Catherine's story, he felt an undeniable pull and decided to reach out. Their correspondence began with that first letter and quickly became a lifeline for both. Ramos and Catherine's bond deepened over time, leading him to visit her in prison. Their connection was immediate and profound, culminating in their marriage on November 27, 2013, in the Correctional Facility Chapel. After serving 16 years behind bars, the Jones siblings were finally released. Curtis Jr., then 29, walked free from a South Florida prison on July 28, 2015, while Catherine, 30, was released 4 days later from another facility over 200 miles away. Reintegrating into society was a daunting challenge for both, as they had spent more than half their lives in confinement, disconnected from the rapid technological and social changes of the outside world. Reports conflict on whether the siblings ever reunited. As co-defendants, legal restrictions prohibited them from having contact to avoid any violation of their parole. Curtis chose a life of quiet faith, reportedly becoming an ordained Christian minister. Catherine, on the other hand, pursued a more conventional path, moving in with her husband Ramos, who made significant changes to help her adjust to life outside prison. He retired from the Navy to dedicate more time to supporting Catherine as she faced the hurdles of starting over. Life after prison was far from easy. Catherine, at 30, had to learn basic skills like using a smartphone, driving a car, and continuing her education. Despite the challenges, she embraced the opportunity for a fresh start, determined to leave her past behind. She eventually became a mother of two, a son and a daughter, and although her marriage to Ramus didn't last, Catherine remained hopeful about the future. She earned a presidential scholarship to pursue her education, which she could keep as long as she maintained a GPA of 3.75. Motivated by her experiences, Catherine became an advocate for juvenile justice reform. Through her involvement with the Campaign for Fair Sentencing of Youth in Orange County, she worked to bring awareness to the plight of incarcerated minors. While the scars of the past could never fully heal, Catherine channeled her pain into a mission to help others. Her journey from a terrified child to an advocate for change stood as a testament to resilience and the possibility of redemption, even in the face of unimaginable adversity. Her transformation, however, wasn't the only story shaped by the events of the past. Nicole's daughters, Jessica and Ines, who were just 9 and 8 at the time of their mother's death, also bore the scars of that tragedy. Raised by their maternal grandmother in Alabama, the sisters hid the truth about their mother for years, telling friends she was still living in Florida. It wasn't until Jessica reached her senior year of high school that she found the courage to reveal the truth. The pain of losing their mother in such a violent manner remained raw for both sisters. Celebrations like birthdays, graduations, and family milestones were bittersweet reminders of her absence. Jessica, who pursued a degree in criminal justice, recounted her graduation day as both triumphant and sorrowful. Though surrounded by family and friends, the void left by her mother was unmistakable. Ines lamented that her children, as well as Jessica's, would never know their grandmother. To honor Nicole's memory, the sisters continued traditions like listening to her favorite songs and visiting her grave each April 23rd on her birthday. They brought their children and released balloons in her honor, a poignant gesture connecting the next generation to a woman they would never meet. While both sisters expressed empathy for the abuse Catherine and Curtis endured, they were firm in their belief that Nicole was not responsible and should not have been a target. Jessica often reflected on how differently things could have turned out. She believed that if Child Protective Services had intervened in Catherine and Curtis's lives, the siblings might never have harbored violent thoughts or taken such drastic action. Despite her grief, Jessica found solace in forgiveness, saying that holding on to anger would only consume her and prevent her from healing. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.